Hi, everyone, and welcome back to the Vixen Voice. I'm so excited this morning because I actually haven't recorded an episode in a month, and it feels so weird. I'm like a kid learning how to ride a bicycle again. But I'm not too worried because I have an amazing guest today, Dana Skaggs. Dana has a master's in clinical psychology, and she's a licensed psychotherapist. And what I love is she's known as the queen of boundaries. And if you've listened to me before, you know I'm a huge proponent of boundaries, both at work and in our personal lives. And I'm a very huge proponent of time boundaries, which a lot of people don't think about. So I love to coach my clients on boundaries, but that's really just from my experience. So I love that we have Dana here today, who is an expert in this field, and she has her own compelling story too that she's going to share with us. I got to know Dana because we have a mutual friend, so I'm going to shout out to Yolanda Harris for introducing us. Thank you so much, Yolanda. And I just want to tell you, Dana's in East Tennessee, I'm in Middle Tennessee, and you're just going to have some fun. We take it easy here in Tennessee, although we like to work hard as well, so we'll give you some great tips. So, Dana, thank you so much for joining us today.
This is wonderful. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I'm super excited to dig in. It's kind of funny. I like to say about boundaries. Some people find it as fun to talk about as taxes because I used to be a financial advisor, right? Or find setting boundaries as painful as paying taxes. But I think it's really critical. And in my experience, we just have not been taught or socialized to set
Mhm.
proper boundaries. And the other thing I've understood is we've usually inherited the boundaries of our parents or grandparents, whoever it was that
Mhm.
made the biggest impact on us. And kind of as, I won't curse, but as grown adults, we have to figure out like, okay, what are my boundaries? What's important to me? And what's worth protecting? Because so many people are fearful of boundaries, but really, I view boundaries as a way to have a healthy, loving relationship with people in your lives. So, Dana, I'm going to let you jump in there. Like, I guess, before we get to your story, what have you experienced with your clients? Why do you think setting and maintaining boundaries is so difficult?
Oh my goodness. So, first of all, I wanted to wrap back around to your point about us being in Tennessee. And a lot of times when we're raised, especially females, but
Mm-hmm.
not always females, we're raised that you can't be rude. That's
Mm-hmm.
sometimes what I run into people when I start talking to them about boundaries. They're like, "Well, but I feel like I'm being rude if I say no,
Yes.
or if I don't go along with what they want me to do, or whatever. If I'm not agreeable, if I'm not keeping the peace, then I'm going to be a rude person." This is
Mm-hmm.
not true. And as we get into talking more and more about boundaries, if someone else perceives us as rude, we can't control that.
Yeah.
We're not in control of how someone else is going to perceive us. So, you know, being a psychotherapist, I noticed over time that when my patients would come in to see me and they would start talking about, okay, why I'm here and this is all the stuff that's going on in my life, and I'm listening to them, but then I'm thinking the first thing we have to do is figure out how much of all of this mess belongs to them and how much of it
Yes.
belongs to someone
Love it.
else. Because people get that backwards. Rather than paying attention to what actually belongs to them, they ignore
Mm-hmm.
that and they spend way too much time, what I call in someone else's yard, and we can talk about that
Yep.
later. Um, so much time trying to focus on what other people are thinking, what other people are feeling, other
Mm-hmm.
people's expectations. We can't control those things. And so
No.
they get it backwards. So we have to kind of define right from the get go, right out of the gate, how much of this belongs to you and how much of this belongs to somebody else.
Yeah, and if I can take that a step deeper, because I do spiritual work as well, and from a spiritual standpoint, and also, psychology, really, I feel like if you're trying to not be rude to someone, you're just being codependent in their bad behavior, right? So, from a pure spiritual standpoint, I believe everyone has free will, and it's not our job to violate their free will, and it's not someone else's job to violate my free will. So, sometimes, like, you're not helping someone along their journey by being a co conspirator in their bad behavior. It's like how I've come to view it, right? Like, I'm not really doing you a favor if I'm letting you treat me that way because you're not learning and growing from this experience. But I understand most people do not see the world that way. Like, it's something I've spent years working on. So, but it's so interesting. But once you shift your perspective, it becomes so much easier. Like, my first aha, I know you're going to share your story with your mother, right? Is my mom, I had spent all this time working on myself, and I was spending like an hour and a half a day between meditation, coaching, like personal growth, etc. And then my mom would come, drop me her emotional ball of whatever, right? And I was like, well, why should I have to deal with this when I'm working so hard to make sure I don't have this in my life? So I love that you start with what's yours and what is someone else's, because often the roles we play, like I joke, like, I feel like my mother was the hardest person to set boundaries with for many reasons, being like the oldest child, the good girl. Like you said, there are all these roles we play, right? And yes, I grew up actually in South Mississippi, so the deep, deep South, where you are definitely never rude. So I totally hear you. But let's dig in and let's get back to your story. So obviously, I have this amazing, accomplished woman sitting in front of me. And by the way, I love your analogies about boundaries, so I can't wait till we get into those. But I'm sure you weren't always here. You weren't always the queen of boundaries, right? So can you share with us a little bit about your story and maybe the journey that's brought you to where we are today?
Sure. I want to give a shout out, first of all, to all the firstborn daughters.
Me.
Firstborn and daughter and female, but also a shout out to those people who are listening who have had to struggle with difficult relationships with their parents because, and I'm one of them, because even telling the story, and when I've tried to do this, it's like you're trying to tell it in a respectful way. But there's judgment. There's a lot of people that don't understand, that haven't walked the path, that are on the outside, and they have a different relationship.
Yeah.
When you're setting boundaries, you learn that along the way, that you have a right to your story, but there will be other people who sometimes don't understand, and they don't approve, and they don't accept it, and they come back with criticism and judgment. And so shout out to all those people out there like myself who have walked that path. So let me back up and kind of explain what I'm talking about. So my family, I had I did not have a hugely traumatic upbringing, but I was an adult. And this is so ironic. I was an adult with a master's degree in clinical psychology and had to be told by a relative of mine that I was actually being emotionally abused.
Wow.
By my mother, because I didn't know. And that is so, because I was raised in, that was my norm. And so I didn't see it as abuse. And I remember that phone call. I remember where I was sitting thinking, what? But that explained a lot of things. And it also explained how I ended up in psychology, because growing up in the environment, basically, my mother was a lot of different things. And I know people that are listening as well, they'll be able to relate that the people that we struggle with, they're not some monster, right? They're not always some bad person. They're not always this good person. The people that I'm talking about, my experience, right, is that there's a weaving in and out of pathology, and then they become kind of normalish for a while. And then there's that hope that, oh, maybe that bad stuff is gone. Maybe we're normal now. Maybe that won't come back. And so then you start hoping. And then you let your guard down. Or I guess I'll talk about myself. I let my guard down. And then I say the wheels on the bus go round and round, because it felt like it would always circle back around, and then the pathology would come back again. And so it's hard when you're telling a story, because I have memories very positive of my mother. Like, she taught me how to color, and I remember her taking me to swimming lessons and all these positive things. In addition to that, there was a lot of emotional instability, and there was narcissism and gaslighting. And the whole family was sort of defined and wrapped around her moods. She had significant mood issues, and everything in what was going on in the home, it was all about trying to get her to be okay. And so I was frequently, if she was upset, did I upset her? And it was my job to make that okay. And so I was going through thinking, what's going on? And feeling responsible for that. I felt like I had to always be a step ahead in order to keep myself protected and safe. I had to figure out, what was she going to do? Wow. What was she going to say? So that if I could get ahead of it, if I could figure it out, then maybe I could feel safe. And I feel like that is one of the things that led me into psychology, because I'm very good now at reading people, because I had to. And I'm very good at analyzing and being analytical with situations of what are the components how can we break this situation down? What are the elements that are going into it? And which ones are dysfunctional, which ones are healthy, and how do we realign? And so that's what I end up doing lots of times with my patients, is kind of helping them from that perspective, because that's what I had to do growing up.
It's so interesting. Yeah, no, it's a lot. And I mean, my heart goes out to like young Dana. It was like you were constantly walking on eggshells, right? And you didn't have that sense of security. But like you said, from the outside, you probably looked like you had like this amazing childhood. And so no one got it. But something you said, it really stuck out to me, how you can read people because you always had to. If you know Ed Milet, who's considered one of the best interviewers on the planet right now, his story is very similar, because he grew up with an alcoholic father, and being the son, he felt it was his job to protect. And so he would say, like, when his father walked in, he could tell by the way he put his keys down if it was going to be a good night or a bad night, right? Yep. And just being like hypersensitive to things. So it's really interesting, because I do believe it's unfortunate that we have to go through bad stuff, but a lot of times the bad stuff is to train us for our purpose in life. So I love hearing how you've captured that and, made it a purpose to make something positive from it.
Yeah, it's been a blessing to be able to do that, truly. To be in therapy, it's one of my favorite things to do, to have my patients come in and listen to them, and I'm zeroed in. At that moment, the world does not exist. Nothing exists except my patient. And I'm totally right there with them, and that's the only thing. The whole world falls away, and I'm just right there with them and listening to their story and being there with them and feeling that. But my mind, because I've got that part, the compassionate, empathetic part, and then I also have this very analytical part that's, while they're talking, it's like it's going almost like a computer, this sort of pulling out and separating out, what if this belongs to my patient, and then what can we do about that? And what if this actually belongs to someone else? And then helping them to see that, and then giving and equipping them, because that was a journey for me. I was raised feeling responsible for my mother's and long into my adult years. It wasn't just my childhood. It was way, way longer than that. And then there was also enablers around that I termed the henchmen, that they would push in, and if something was wrong with my mother, then the question would be, Dana, what did you do? Why are you not doing this? She's upset because of you. Oh. She's upset because you didn't do this, or you didn't do that, or you should be doing this, or you should be doing that. So I was blamed all this time. She could do anything and was kind of given a free pass, but I had to stay the straight and narrow. And if I stepped one to the right or the left, then it was my fault that she wasn't doing well. And so then I felt like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to fix her? How am I supposed to make
Mm-hmm.
her okay? But that was not possible because that's outside of my scope. We
Right.
can't make other people well. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to learn that. And so now I'm really good at teaching my patients and my clients how to figure out the difference between what belongs to them that they can actually do something about and change, and what belongs to
Yes.
someone else that we need to let go of. Like, let me give you one example. We frequently say, he made me mad, or she
Mm-hmm.
made me mad, right? We hear that a lot. We say that a lot. Technically, that's not even possible
I
because the
agree.
other person's anger is in their brain. That's where their emotion resides, is in their brain. And unless, I don't know if you've seen SpongeBob, at Plankton on SpongeBob, he has a section where he's like in SpongeBob's brain. Unless we're actually having access to another person's brain,
Yeah.
we cannot make them feel anything. They're the ones that are choosing to respond with that kind of feeling. And so it's training my patients how to figure
Yeah.
that out.
I love that because I always say the only two things we're truly in control of on this earth, well, there's a little bit more, but our actions and our reactions, right? And then the higher level is to learn to control your thinking and your emotions. But I agree, we can't control the other person. All we can control is how we react to what they're doing and how we take that in. So I love everything you're saying. I totally agree, and I hope that the women listening are taking this in too, and maybe, because awareness is 50% of the battle. Sometimes you hear something
Oh,
and you're like, oh, that's what's going on, and then it's like validation that, okay, I'm not crazy, or I'm not the bad one, because like you said, so much gaslighting goes on that this is your
mm-hmm.
fault or you did this. But I mean, that must have been exhausting hearing your story that you had to like toe the line all the time. So you weren't able
Mm-hmm.
just to be a natural human being. And then the other thing I heard you chatting about is the responsibility you felt. And I don't know what's going on, but I feel this is an epidemic with women in our generation. I too had to shed the responsibility gene and do a lot of work to understand that I am not responsible for everyone around me. And honestly, that's a big part of why I left my financial practice after 15 years, because, I basically burned out feeling responsible for hundreds of clients and their families, my team, and then my parents joined my company too. And, here I am, a single woman with no children, and yet I had like hundreds of children, kind of the way my brain thought, right? And I even had a client once say, like, literally, I had a client say to me, well, how could you have kids? You have all of us to take care of. And so it's amazing how people will accept you being responsible for them. So it really
Mm-hmm.
is your job to recognize this and understand, I don't have to do this. And I love how you said your childhood. I had a great childhood. I have to say my parents are my best friends, even though I talk about toxicity between us and stuff. We've worked through it, and we're at a very healthy. In fact, they're coming here tonight. I'm super excited to spend 4 days with them. But we're all human beings and we have our stuff, and our parents put their stuff on us like unintentionally, and we have
Mm-hmm.
to learn how to undo that. But a little bit of the work I did was, I was the second oldest grandchild of nine, the oldest girl, so it wasn't just my parents. And like, I was very social, I was very precocious, so like, I entertained the adults. So from like the age of 4, I sat at the adult table, not the child table. And so, of course, as a kid, you think, oh, this is cool, I'm special, like, blah, blah, blah. I realized in my life that's why I felt like I was on all the time. I felt like people expected me to entertain them, to carry the conversation, etc. And I realized that I never got to be a child. And that's what I
Mm-hmm.
hear when I hear you saying you had to toe the line and walk the line,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like you were, because I was kind of my parents' best friend. They would talk to me about everything. And looking back, I'm like, that's kind of crazy. Like it's a little insane that at 12 I was hearing about their money problems, or when they were mad at each other, or whatever was going on. And again, our parents don't mean harm to us in these situations. It's just something that happens. So I guess that was a long way to say, do you see this epidemic I'm talking about, like with us Gen Xers? I feel like a lot of us have this responsibility issue.
Oh, 100%, 100%, especially, and like it or not, especially females. I mean, I do have
Yes, agreed.
male, patients that deal with this as well, and business boundaries as well. But there is this thing where just feeling responsible for everybody around you, and we train people what to expect from us. So
Mm-hmm.
if we have
100.
if we have done that with them, then we've trained them to expect it. And so that's one of the things I tell my patients. That's a good thing, actually, to know that we train people what to expect from us, so that if someone who we have known for a while, now not somebody that we met last week, right? But
Yeah.
somebody that we've known for a while, if they expect something from us, it's because we've trained them to expect that. That is a
Mm-hmm.
good thing, because then if we have trained them to expect that, that means we can retrain. Now, that's
Yes.
harder, right?
Yeah.
It's hard because we have to give them grace, because if they expect a certain
Mm-hmm.
thing from us, it's because we have trained them to expect that. So if we're going to switch
Mm-hmm.
gears and go like 180 degrees in the other direction, then naturally they're going to be like, "Scourge, what are you doing?"
Agreed.
So we need to have that grace and understand, okay, I understand why you're feeling this way. I'm going to make a few changes. We can verbalize that if we want to. We don't have
Mm-hmm.
to, by the way, but we can. We can say, "Hey, I
Mm-hmm.
realize I used to do this and this and this, and I've been doing some soul searching, and I'm going to make some changes in my life. So I'm going to start behaving in this new way." Just so you know.
Mm-hmm.
So when you like want me to text you 15,000 times a day, I'm not going to text back. Or
Yeah.
when you want to show up at my doorstep at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning and have a chat, I'm not going to do that, or whatever. Keep in mind, though, when we say these words to people, they're going to hear
Mm-hmm.
us and they're not going to believe us, because
Yep.
we've trained them otherwise. Our behavior has always got to match our words. So if we say we're going to change, we better darn well
Yeah.
change. Because if we say we're going to do something different and we don't, we have trained them to just ignore us. Oh,
Mm-hmm.
don't. She just says that. She's not really going to do it. But if your behavior matches your words, they won't like it in the beginning and they will chafe and they will push
Mm-hmm.
back. But here's the thing, some people will adapt
Yeah.
and they were like, "Oh, okay," and they'll respect your new boundaries. But here's the thing, some people won't.
Right.
And that was a situation that I had with my mother. It was
Mm-hmm.
basically, it was a scenario where I was trying to set some healthy boundaries, but she perceived my boundaries as rejection and abandonment because of her
Mm.
emotional diagnoses, okay? So to her, when I was trying to set boundaries, that felt like I was throwing her off a cliff, because she
Mm-hmm.
wanted to be very enmeshed with me. She wanted to be very dependent and enmeshed with me. And so whenever I decided, no, I'm not going to do that anymore, I want to have a healthy relationship with you, right? But she
Mm-hmm.
wouldn't give me that option. It's you either have to do it her way with the enmeshed codependency, or no way.
Yeah.
And sometimes they'll respond in that way, and we don't have control over that. We have the right to set healthy boundaries, and if someone adjusts with us, that's awesome, right? Now we have
Yeah.
this wonderful, nourishing, healthy, strong relationship with these people. But sometimes they're like, "No, I don't accept that. And we're gonna keep doing it the way we used to do it, or I'm not gonna, you're dead to me." And
Yeah.
so,
Well, you say it so much gentler than I do because I talk about this. So when I'm coaching, I kind of have a framework just that I walk my clients through for setting boundaries because at first I think a framework helps, right? And then you develop
mhm,
your own way, but you're so nervous about the outcome that if you don't have a track to follow, it becomes difficult. And I'm like, look, a normal human being, you might have to give them friendly reminders it's going to be fine. But, if you're dealing with a narcissist or a sociopath, they're not going to
they
react
won't.
well. I mean, and
Mm-mm.
that's the case you had with your mother, right? She's a diagnosed narcissist. And this is also, especially with women, I have a very good friend right now, like having some issues in her marriage. And of course, you want the marriage to work out. And it's like, and I feel like it's a situation where there might be some emotional abuse, right? But until she understands, okay, this isn't fixable, that's a really hard decision to make. And that's why I think it's so important to delineate, hey, there are certain people that are wired a certain way and they are just not going to adapt and they are not going to heal likely. So share with us a little bit, like, kind of, when did you understand or realize this with your mother? What brought you to understand that you were dealing with something different? It wasn't just someone, you know, not honoring your boundaries.
Right. Well, okay. So my dad passed away about 20, 23, almost 23 years ago. And my mother, went on and, she was working, and years passed, and she wasn't doing well. And advice I would give, don't sit around the house too much. And she was working full time. She's an RN. She's a smart woman, right? But what started happening, because she has a diagnosis, a personality disorder type of diagnosis, that what this particular group does is they kind of zero in on one person, and that person kind of has the bullseye on their back, and that's the one who they want to meet their needs, and they want to enmesh with that one individual. Okay. So my dad had been that person. So I had kind of gotten the splash over, right, throughout the years, but he had been like that one. And then when he passed away, she was kind of looking, all right, and I was there for years and years and years. But what happened in the end, though, is that she was not able to get enough attention. I think it's impossible, actually, because of things that happened to her long, long, long before I came on the scene. Okay, for her to get enough attention, it's I don't know if it's even possible. And so she would want a high level of attention from me, and if I wouldn't give it to her, then she would sabotage and do things to force me. Like, for example, she enjoyed calling 911 a lot. Calling the ambulance. Her favorite day to do that was on Sunday. She had a favorite day. And when she was in the hospital, one time she referred to it as holding court. And I know she would say, oh, that was just a funny thing I was saying, but I never ever forgot that, because I think there's so much more truth to that than she realized. So she would go into the hospital, and I actually had an emergency room physician after her doing this over and over. And, then because they're your parents in the hospital, right?
Yeah.
So you got to go, right?
Yeah.
So time and time and time and time again, I'm going to the hospital, I'm going to the doctor visits, I'm doing all these things. I had 3 different physicians I can think of. One of them was an ER doctor, told me to stop bringing her to the hospital, that she was doing it to manipulate me. An ER doctor told me that. A psychologist in one of the rehab facilities that they discharged them to before they discharged them home told me that she was a master manipulator. Okay. And I have other stories along these lines, but see, that's what she would do. And I did some thinking about this, and to me, it felt like emotional extortion. Like, I'm going to get some feelings out of you. I'm going to get some attention from you. I'm going to get it, and I'm going to force it out of you. I'm going to extort it out of you. You're either going to give it to me, all I want, or I'm going to find a way for you to pay attention to me. I'm going to be in the hospital, and I'm going to call all my relatives, and they're all going to know I'm in the hospital. And then all the hospital staff are going to want to get a hold of me to find out, okay, well, what's the discharge plan? And this is your mother and all this. And this went on and on and on. Okay. Yeah. So that was the situation where I finally it just did not end well. But that's how it was in the end game. And I set some boundaries and said, I'm not going to continue to do this. Yeah. And I'm sure I looked like a flaming a-hole, okay? And that's what I'm saying to the listeners. If you happen to be walking this path, when you set these kinds of boundaries in these situations, it's not uncommon for other people to criticize and judge because they don't really understand, and you might appear to them to be like a villain.
Yeah.
And so she would cast herself as the victim, and I would get cast as the villain. So when I set my boundaries, she finally told me I was toxic to her and didn't want anything to do with me, and it just did not end well. So it's these situations don't always have little happy endings with daffodils and sunbeams.
Yeah, it's interesting because a very good friend of mine recently had to be in that position with her brother, her older brother, because, he was, I think, having to go in for a kidney transplant because he's diabetic. And she's talking to the doctor, and the doctor's like, well, he wouldn't have had to do this if he had followed the diet and did that. Like, basically, they had laid out a plan for him, and he just refused to follow it. And here you are. And she was like, I cannot continue to show up if you refuse to take care of your health and you end up here in the hospital. And, I had a similar conversation with my parents. I was like, and luckily my parents are doing the steps to take care of themselves now, but there were multiple members of my family and I kept having to fly, to go to the hospital. And I was like, why is this triggering me? And then because when I get triggered, I'm always like, what's going on? There's something else going on. And that's one tip I was told about boundaries. Like, if you feel resentful towards someone, probably someone's crossed a boundary, and try to figure out what it is, right? And so I realized I was getting triggered because, I have am very connected to God. Like, God is number one in my life. My soul is number two. Then everyone else comes, right? So that's what allowed me to set healthy boundaries. Because I'm like, I'm not going to damage my soul for eternity to do something you want me to do. But I realize I view my body as the temple that God gave me, and it's my duty to take care of it. And I mean, I haven't had any form of medication in a few years now. I don't get sick. I understand I'm also blessed genetically. I'm healthy, but I do what I need to take care of myself. So then when someone is refusing to take care of themselves and going counteractive and then ends up in the hospital, it's violating a deep core value of mine. So again, I'm being asked to be codependent in their bad behavior. And I use the term bad loosely. We're not talking about evil or different, but this is a deeply held belief I have, and then I have to go against it. And of course, if it's a true emergency, I'm there. And I had that talk with my parents, and I've seen their behavior shift, and they've taken care of themselves better, and they've done different. But again, I'm not dealing, with someone with a personality disorder or a narcissist and I do think my father is kind of recovering narcissist because we've definitely had issues. But for whatever reason, they listened to me, and I had a very calm conversation, and I was just like, I'm not going to be on the plane again if you're not taking care of yourself. If you're taking care of yourself, look, I understand you're getting older, things happen. I am here every time I am here. But yeah, I mean, my friend had it, you had it, I had this conversation. And so I think it's worth noting because I think a lot of people in our generation are dealing with this issue right now, right? I can even remember my grandmother, and she probably did have some disorder. A lot of people found my grandmother difficult. I, for some reason, understood her, which probably means I'm difficult like she is. Isn't it funny when you're like, oh yeah, everyone thought that was weird, and then, oh yeah, I'm kind of like her. Like, okay. So, but I remember going with my dad at 2 a.m. across town because my grandmother was like, oh my gosh, I can't breathe. And it was after my grandfather passed. And a lot of times it's attention seeking, but to what degree is it attention seeking? Is it like harmless grieving attention seeking, or is it to the level of manipulation? And I think that's why from the outside, it's so hard for people to understand because they don't know how many times you've been called in the middle of the night to go across town or to go to the hospital and deal with different things. So thank you for sharing that story. I think it's important for us to hear each other's stories so that we know we're not alone and our situation may not be to the same degree and it's different. But I do feel that we are dealing with this a lot. So this might be out there, but why do you think we Gen Xers struggle with boundaries because I feel the generations behind us do not have the issues we have, right? And I wonder if the baby boomers, I'm trying to think, I don't know what it was about the way we're raised or what the expectations were in the world when we were growing up, but I feel like we tend to have the hardest time setting boundaries. Would you agree with that?
I would, and it's been my experience and some people that I've talked
Hmm.
to that are Gen X is that when we were raised, and kind of we alluded to this earlier, we didn't really have a say, right? I
Right.
remember being told, go hug this person or go do this with this person, or there was not, and you just did it because it was expected, right? And that's maybe how our
Hmm.
parents were raised or whatever like that. I feel like that we couldn't we couldn't really say no, because if we said
Hmm.
no, like, and it's all over the social media, the TikTok videos, all the memes and stuff about, if Gen Xers, if we said no, it was not good, right? We did not say no to our parents. That
Yeah.
was not, we did not do that. But I
Yeah.
think
It's
because of
true.
our experience, that I know that for example, when I raised my kids, I have three, and I'm like, I wanted them to feel like they could speak their words,
Hmm.
that they could, I expected respect from them, certainly.
Hmm.
But I wanted to train them to where if they had some kind of feeling about something, or they disagreed with something, they didn't understand where I was coming from, or they had a different viewpoint, I wanted to create that space to where they felt
Hmm.
comfortable growing up speaking their opinions
Yeah.
and saying, I don't like this. And at the end of the day, they understood I was the authority. I was going to be the one to say yes or no, and you don't have to
Right.
like it. I'm the parent, you're not, get over it. But we don't, I think that we try to help our kids and the younger generations have a say, and I think
Hmm.
sometimes it's gone too far,
Yeah.
that I see people where they go and they don't, there's no sense of authority. It's like they
Right.
can just do whatever they want to do, if they have a feeling and they just want to, like, just manipulate the whole entire room with their feelings, that they're allowed to do
Hmm.
that. I don't agree with that. I don't
Yeah.
think that's okay. That's not an appropriate way to interact. But when the Gen Xers, when we were being raised up, you didn't say no. Mm-mm.
Yeah.
That that was not good.
So it's interesting you say that because I'm listening, I'm thinking because I've always said I grew up in a household where we were encouraged to have our opinion, which is probably why myself and my two siblings are all entrepreneurs, right? Like we kind of blaze our own path. But as I'm listening to you, it was in private that we were allowed to have our own opinion, right? It was at home or my parents are making big decisions, but you're right. In public, we were expected to act a certain way. So that was like kind of an interesting aha for me because I would have told you, hey, I had a lot of freedom growing up, and again, I grew up in the deep south where manners and you interact with people a certain way, and we all have these things wherever you grew up. There's certain so yeah, because I remember like our house was chosen by the garden club when I was in fifth grade for the tour, how they have the home tours.
Hmm.
And so my
Yeah.
parents let me stay home for the day, but I put on a dress and played hostess in like the fifth grade. Like this is how we were trained. So there's no way in the middle of that event I could have told my mom, no, I'm not doing that. Like you're like again very much
Mm.
on show, like opening your house up to other people and expected to be the good host or hostess, which is interesting. So, sorry, my brain was going as you were talking about that. So, it's so interesting because the layers just keep unfolding as we get older and hopefully wiser and grow.
Do you remember the phrase, children are to be seen and not heard?
Yeah, that
Did,
one was not so big in our house. Our grandparents would hold us to that, I remember. So my
oh,
parents were held to that standard, but my parents, we were okay to talk, but we always had to be respectful of other people and their property, which was probably carried to an extreme. But I remember that saying. And I have memories of my grandfather always telling me that I spoke too loud because I have a very strong voice, right? And I remember how I would feel. And my niece is the same way, and she's 8. And if anyone tries to shush her, I'm like, she's fine, like she is. Thank you. Like I'm like, her voice is beautiful. Thank you.
Well, I think for us raising up and finding our voice, because I can remember feeling that my feelings didn't really matter, especially as it compared
Wow.
to, especially my mother's. And how
Yeah.
much of that was Gen X and how much of that was what was going on in my home,
Hmm.
I'm not really sure. But I distinctly remember, if she was, I would get trumped. I mean, it doesn't really matter. If she was in a mood, if she was having one of her moments, then
Hmm.
that was the most important thing in the house. And the most important thing was that
Hmm.
who upset her, number one. She was never held responsible for herself. It's a who upset her. And
Wow.
usually I was the firstborn and I'm the daughter, so it's just like, did you do something? Did you say something? And then who's going to calm her down? So she was
Yeah.
not responsible for her own emotions, nor was she responsible for managing herself. It was put on, a lot of it was put on me as the oldest, and it was like role reversal in a sense, but
Yeah.
there was no space like for if I was angry, and to this day I have a difficult time expressing anger because I will
Yeah.
just go ice. If I'm really mad at somebody, I will become ice. I won't look at them. I won't, and I have to work my way through that so I can have a conversation.
Hmm.
Because with boundaries, see, I always say whoever holds the upset, that's whose responsibility it is to speak. It's not someone else's job to read our mind, right?
Yep.
So I had to learn, and I had to learn about boundaries, and I had to give myself permission that I'm upset about this. I can either let it go or I can engage the person in conversation about what I'm angry about. And
Hmm.
so I had to learn how to do that because when I was growing up, I wasn't allowed to be angry. If I was angry, I just had to
Hmm.
swallow it because my feelings didn't matter. What was most important was what my mother was feeling and what she was doing in the house, how her mood was impacting the household. So that's part of boundaries, is coming into our own and taking that ownership.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I wasn't allowed to be angry either. I don't know if it was because I was a girl or because it was the South or that was just my parents' thing, but yeah, anger was not acceptable. So I'd agree. So I love when you said whoever holds the upset, it's their responsibility to speak. So Dana, if you don't mind, let's move into maybe some tips you can share with our audience. First of all, I like to talk about how to recognize it's time to set a boundary, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because if you're not good at setting boundaries, sometimes you don't know. Like you said, it was like a normal mode of operation for you and you didn't realize that there was something harmful going on. So, what are maybe, I've been told if you feel resentful, and then actually my coach was like, okay, let's back that up. When did you first know? And I was like, oh, this stressed me out, right? So, when someone else's behavior maybe stresses you out, but I don't know. Do you have tips that you can share of like, hey, in this situation, it probably means you should speak up?
Oh, absolutely. So, several things that come to mind. One is a
Hmm.
kind of an interesting analogy, but for example, have you thought about your throat during this whole time that we've been talking? Have you been aware of
No.
your throat? No, I haven't either. But if you had
Yeah.
strep throat, you would become aware of your throat. You'd be thinking about it a lot. So, the same way when
Hmm.
we're in healthy relationships, we don't really think about them because they're
Yep.
healthy. But when something is bothering us and we're something about the person, we're feeling anxious, we're feeling some kind of upset, we're feeling nervous, we don't feel like we can communicate ourselves, or we're worried about their feelings, that is an indication that there's something going on boundary wise. Okay, that's one
Hmm.
one indication is your anxiety is elevated when you're around a particular person. Another thing to think about is people that get into this groove where they have to keep the peace. I've
Yep.
got to keep the peace everywhere I go. It's my job. I'm the peacekeeper. I don't know how many patients I've had sit in my office. If I had $1 for everyone, I mean, but they think it's normal. They think it's admirable, right? I'm the
Hmm.
peacekeeper. Okay, that sounds great, doesn't it? That sounds very
Hmm.
nice, but it's a boundary issue, and other people's peace is not yours to keep. You can't keep somebody else's peace, it's in their brain.
Yeah.
So that, if you've identified yourself as the peacekeeper, you
Yeah.
need to worry about your own peace, right? Your
Yeah.
peace is the one you need to be keeping, not other people's peace.
So
And
that's interesting because I was for sure the peacekeeper in my house. I was the one everyone came to with their problems. And in my family, I still am the person everyone. And a couple of years ago, every year I would have, when I lived in Houston, a little get together with my girlfriends around the holidays. And one year I was like really busy. So I was like, okay, I'm just going to treat you all. We were going to this wine bar and I still was the hostess. So I'm like pouring wine. And my neighbor, who I love, she was like, "What are you doing?" And I'm like, "I'm taking care of my guest." And she was like, "Don't you think it's kind of controlling?" And like, I had never thought of it that way, right? But like, that was when I was still in my I'm responsible for everyone. It's my responsibility that everyone has a good time, that everyone has great conversation, that no one has a disagreement. And I was like, but I mean, she was saying it lovingly, and it was like such an aha moment for me. I'm like, oh my gosh, you're so right. So, yeah, I love this. I've never heard this for boundaries, but I can totally relate to being the peacekeeper and how you have to like step out of that role.
Absolutely. And also having hard conversations. If we have a
Yes.
difficulty, if we really feel like we need to tell somebody something, whether it's professionally or personally, and we know we need to have the conversation, but we find ourselves dreading it. We find ourselves
Hmm.
avoiding it, trying to evade around to try to not have the conversation, really hovering over that and thinking, what is it exactly? Why am I so scared? Because if we can just briefly
Hmm.
talk about the yards for a moment, because that's how I understand everything
Hmm.
about boundaries.
I love it.
In your yard, basically, are your thoughts, your feelings, and your actions, right? And at the edge of your property line is a fence. And on the other side of that fence is your neighbor. And in your neighbor's yard are his or her thoughts, feelings, and actions, which you are not responsible for. Now, just
Hmm.
like in a typical neighborhood, we might be impacted by our neighbors, right? If we have a neighbor over there throwing some kind of crazy party,
Right.
we're gonna hear it. But if a police officer drives down the road, we're not going to be given a ticket because it's not in our yard, right? It's their yard. So
Hmm.
we need to recognize, like, if we're having some kind of thought or some kind of feeling that's giving us a problem. I'll leave you with this one example here is a boomerang, right? What I
Hmm.
call a boomerang issue. So if there's something that we're upset about, but like I said before, we don't want to talk about it because we kind of think that when we do, the person's not going to like it.
Yeah.
They're going to get mad, they're going to yell, they might hold a grudge, ooh. So we try to fling it out. We don't want to talk about that. Let's just ignore that. I don't want to, let's, no, no, blah, 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 right? But it boomerangs back in the form of
Yeah.
intrusive thoughts. We don't want to think
Hmm.
about it, so we try to shove it out, and we're driving our car down the road, and there's that thought again. Ugh. It's
Hmm.
boomeranged back in the form of an intrusive thought. You tried to fling it out,
Hmm.
but it came back. If we have a boomerang issue, if we walk out in our yard and we see a boomerang lying there on our grass, it's our responsibility to pick it up, walk
Hmm.
across our yard, lean on the fence, and strike up a conversation with our neighbor. And here's the thing, we can do that because how our neighbor hears us, how our neighbor responds back to us, is not our responsibility. Now, I'm not saying
Right.
it's going to be comfortable. Let's be perfectly
Mm-mm.
clear about this, right? When someone gets mad at something that we say or they decide to hold a grudge, that is not comfortable, okay?
Yeah.
It's not. But we can't control that. And what are we going to do?
Hmm.
You're going to like hold all this stuff in your body for years and years because you're scared to death of what your neighbor is going to do? Then you're dishonoring yourself. We are
Right.
responsible for keeping ourself, our body, our mind, our soul peaceful. And we can't do
Hmm.
that if we have a yard littered with boomerangs because those things create bitterness, they create resentment, and that's inside of us. So the reason why we can pick up a boomerang and go across our yard and have the conversation is because we're not owning. If they
Hmm.
hear us and they're like, meh, 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 okay, which they might, that's not comfortable, but that's not on us. That's their feelings. They decided to receive our words that way. Our responsibility is to speak respectfully. You know, when we have the conversation, our words, our behavior, that's on us to be respectful. And I'll tell you one thing right now, if you build up 15 boomerangs and what happens is we don't want to talk about them. We build them up and then they all come out like a Gatling gun.
Yep.
One more thing happens, it builds us pressure. One thing happens and then we start shooting our boomerangs like a Gatling gun at our neighbor all at once. They're getting hit in the face with one after another of these boomerangs. They never knew any of this existed. And if you've ever been on the other side of that, when someone is blasting you with a whole bunch of stuff because they didn't feel comfortable telling you that they didn't like this, or they didn't want to go to that restaurant, or they didn't like that we did this, or they didn't like you said that, but you never knew, you see. Yeah. And they're blasting you with that all at once. That's very uncomfortable. So that's why it's good to not let that pressure build, and just when you have one issue, pick it up, go have the conversation. And you can do it if you're not owning your neighbor's feelings about it.
Yeah, I love that perspective. So, Dana, we don't have a ton of time left. I have a couple more questions to get to know you better. So, any other kind of parting tips that you can leave our audience for how to have that conversation? I know we didn't even get to it. Maybe I would love to have you back. We didn't even get to enforcing it afterwards, which I know is the hardest part, at least in my experience, right? But any tips on how to have that conversation or how to set that boundary to begin with?
Yes, a couple of things come to mind. One of them is to take baby steps. Start practicing baby no's. And they could be as simple as a friend says, hey, you want to go to the local Asian restaurant? Well, maybe you don't. Right? So instead of just saying, sure, right? You might say, just to practice, you might say, well, maybe another time, I would really like to check out, the new restaurant down the street, the Italian one. I've been dying to go there. Let's go there instead. I don't want to go to that Asian restaurant today. So you see, that's a baby no. And you're doing it with people that you feel comfortable with, that you feel safe with. And you start practicing those no's. And another thing, I'm just kind of tossing this out, is to take your situation and bring it to people that you trust and you feel like are wise in these areas. Because sometimes when you're in the middle, and I know this myself, when you're in the middle of something, sometimes you can't see what's going on. And so maybe go to a therapist, maybe go to a coach, maybe go to a best friend, maybe go to someone at your church. Go to people that you respect and that you feel like have some wisdom from life, and say, this is kind of what's going on. This is what I'm feeling. What are your thoughts? I mean, I feel like I need to set some boundaries. I feel like I need to say, I will or will not do this. I'm not going to do this. Person wants me to do this, but I don't want to. But I'm feeling very anxious about saying no. What do you think? So that way you're not alone, so that when you finally do set the boundary, you feel like it's not just your mind, but you've gotten some very wise advice from people that are around you that know the situation and know you.
Yeah. Yes.
And then you're more comfortable. That's not just your thoughts. You're comfortable that, okay, I've got some people behind me. I've got a posse, and they've heard the story. And the truth tellers, not the ones that are just going to tell you what you want to hear. You want to go to the truth tellers. And so if they hear the story and they back you up and they say, we feel like you should set that boundary, we feel like it's a healthy thing, then when you set it, you feel much more comfortable doing that.
No, I love that advice. And because I always say, be careful who you speak to about things, right? Be careful who you let into that world. And that's something I had to learn. And I love how you use the term truth teller. I think, you may not want to hear what they have to say, but the person that's going to give it to you straight. And that's who you should be talking to. I love
it. That's it.
Awesome. Well, Dana, this has been a fascinating conversation. I'm sure everyone listening is going to enjoy. And just friendly reminder, if you're listening to us on Apple or Spotify, we are on YouTube as well. So if you're curious to go see us as we're chatting, check us out on YouTube and drop us a comment. Let us know what you found fascinating about today. I could talk to Dana for hours about this, but I'm going to honor her time and yours by bringing home home right now. So, Dana, before we wrap up, first of all, I'd love to ask you, because I like to talk to my clients about being in their feminine energy. And I know you and I were joking about wearing our springtime colors today. I feel like, of course, it's not just pastels and pretty that brings our feminine energy. So I love to ask this question to get a variety of answers. But when do you feel you're in the flow with your feminine energy? When does that show up for you?
I love my feminine energy when I'm with my husband.
Hmm.
He is a very big supporter of me, and he encourages that and brings that in me because I tend to be quite masculine actually a lot of the time.
Hmm.
And so and a lot of strong women like us tend to have a very firm grip on the masculine side of ourselves. And so the
Hmm.
feminine side I love, and the feminine energy and the feminine strength
Yeah.
I sometimes will allow, and I feel safer allowing that to come out sometimes when I'm around my husband, who is very supportive of me and encourages that and really kind of feeds that back. And so I feel like I can relax and I don't have to
Hmm.
be in protective mode, and I can
Hmm.
embrace that and really kind of move forward in the world in that. He really helps me to reinforce that side of myself.
I love it. That's so beautiful. So, what color would your feminine energy be? Or what color is it?
Oh my goodness, April. Okay, I'm going to tell you the truth.
Yep, go for it.
My favorite color is black.
Yeah. You're not
And
the first
my
person to answer that.
and so that doesn't sound feminine, but
Uh,
it's not pink, it's not yellow. My favorite color is black, and I've had to do some thinking about this, and I think it's
mhm,
because, like when being a therapist, I'm very comfortable going into the depths with people, into the murky
mhm,
depths of where they live, where their pain is. I'm very comfortable doing that and helping them to come out of it. And so
mhm.
I think that's why, because you can't help somebody come out until you can go be there with them in it.
Yep.
And I think that's why black is probably that is my favorite. Not many people know that, but that is my favorite color, black.
Love it. No, I love it. Actually, my very first guest I had on the Vixen Voice, she was a stylist, and she said black was when she felt most feminine as well. So I love it. And, it's just because a lot of times when I talk about feminine energy with strong women, sometimes it's a trigger and they don't like talking about it. And that's why I love having this conversation because mama bear energy is very feminine, right? Like feminine
Hmm.
energy isn't all pastels and being, I have to say, like magenta purple is my feminine energy color. But I love it because it doesn't have to be. I've heard yellow, I've heard teal blue, I've heard Kelly green, black, red. So I love it because we're all different, but I think it's important to acknowledge our masculine and feminine energy and what their strength is and when they come in handy. Because the key, as women on earth, we are adaptable and so we're actually it's easier for us to slide between the masculine and the feminine
Hmm.
than it is for men.
Yeah.
And so I think it's important to understand that because it can be a superpower, but it can be your kryptonite, as we've seen. I know in my lifetime, I've adapted to the man in my life too much, right? And it's become my kryptonite, but then it's also my superpower because I can be a great partner. And that's, in a very small context, but there are many contexts that that's true. So thank you for sharing that. I love that we got your deep, dark answer out. Awesome. Well, that being said, Dana, I'm sure our audience would love to get more tips from you. We'll have everything in the show notes. And by the way, if you have not subscribed to the Vixen Voice, go to our website and subscribe so this gets delivered to your inbox every episode and you don't have to go search for our phenomenal guests. But in the meantime, Dana, what's the best way for our audience to find you?
Fabulous. If they go to danaskaggs.com, there's a free assessment. If they kind of wonder, am
Love
I
it.
good at setting boundaries? Am I not good at setting boundaries? They can take a totally free assessment and get feedback right then and there. And then they can take, I've got two self-study courses. I've got a group course in boundaries. I do boundaries coaching
Nice.
just for people
Love
that
it.
just want to focus on boundaries alone. So I'm there to help train, because that's my passion, is to train as many people as I can to how to go in the world so they can feel safe and they can feel strong and they can feel free in their life, in their space, and in their relationships. And you can do that if you have healthy boundaries.
I love that. Thank you so much. To wrap up, as everyone knows who listens, I always like to share that the world needs more love. I also think it needs more feminine energy, especially right now. So, my question is, how can you show up in love today? If you're listening, just think. And we're talking about boundaries, which is really a foundation for self love. So today I really want you to think, how can I show up in self love? Where is there maybe a place where I'm being the peacekeeper, or I need to have this difficult conversation that I'm hesitating? And how can you show up for love for yourself in that moment? Because the ripple effect will occur and you'll start seeing it show up for others around you. So that's my challenge to everyone listening today. Dana, as we wrap up, what final message would you like to leave our audience with?
Oh, wow. Go into the world with hope and belief that you can say no when you need to, that would help you to build and become stronger, and that you don't have to be afraid. You can let fear go, because you can replace your fear with boundaries, and that's going to give a whole life of healthy relationships, and you can go into your life fearless with boundaries.
I love it. Well, Dana, thanks so much. It's been such a pleasure having you on and finally meeting you face to face. I know we've conversed digitally, so
Yeah.
hopefully when you're driving through Nashville next time, let's grab lunch. Okay, everyone, have a fantastic day, and we will talk to you soon.